What are his plans? For people who haven't been following this day in, day out, how would you describe Zohran Mamdani's plans?
Well, he actually has done a really good job of summarizing it in a digestible way himself. He's running on a platform to make buses fast and free, provide universal childcare, and to freeze the rent in rent-stabilized buildings where the city has some control over the rent. Actually doing that is harder than those slogans, but those are his big promises.
So Fola, come on in here because you sat down with Mamdani at his headquarters down in Chelsea. He was wearing a suit and tie, which seems like he always wears even when he's riding a city bike or walking the entire length of Manhattan. He made a comment to you that was in the piece that I thought was really interesting. They love the free buses, but they don't like the taxes, is what he hears from some of these business leaders. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think we sat down at an interesting time for him and for the campaign. He's coming off a primary campaign where he was really an underdog, right? He in February was polling at 1%, and then for him he then sort of exceeded expectations, won the Democratic primary, and now is sort of running as the front runner. And one of the things he said to me was that the strategy for the primary and for the general election campaign were similar in some ways, because he really, like, the goal was to meet as many people as possible. And so he was now taking his sort of campaign to the business community and trying to shake hands and meet folks and explain who he is and where he's coming from. And I think what he's finding and what he says he's found is that once people have met him, they're sort of receptive to parts of his platform, and he's trying to sit with that.
Well, who's courting who or whom? I never got that right.
No,
thank you very much.
Second time, that was right.
Fola, is it Mamdani courting Wall Street, or is Wall Street courting him, or a little bit of both?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think it's more of a conversation. I mean, one thing we heard in reporting out this story was that, the last time a progressive candidate was running for mayor and was the mayor in New York City, this was a person who didn't reach out to the business community or Wall Street at all. Famously, Bill de Blasio never Jamie Dimon said he never called him once. And, Jamie Dimon was on the list of people that Zohran Mamdani was reaching out to when he was making these sort of overtures to the business community. So I think it's a two-way street.
Yeah, Laura, come on in on this, because some of the names that Jamie Dimon, everybody knows Jamie Dimon, but some of these names are also people who are just not necessarily, they're just very big, like New York City developers, like Jed Walentis, for example, from Two Trees. He was on the list of people who Mamdani has spoken with. How would you characterize the conversations that you and the team have reported out that he's had with folks that may not necessarily seem to be supporters?
I think I would say that they run the gamut, is our understanding. Obviously, we weren't sitting in on any of them and have had them described back to us. But the one constant that we heard from people who talked to him or who have had these conversations reported back to them is that people found him, regardless of whether or not they agreed with him, to be a very good listener and someone who is listening to the feedback that he's getting rather than, spouting his campaign platform to these business leaders.
So does it seem like to you, Laura, that he has changed the way that he's viewed business during this campaign? Less of an adversary, more as a partner?
I think in
is
some
that
ways
incorrect for me to say?
I think that is true in some ways. We've seen the outcome of some of these conversations be that he's made some shifts in the way that he talks about certain things, even things that are not technically business related. He has told us, for example, that he doesn't necessarily need the tax increases that he's proposed to pay for his proposals, as long as he gets the money comes from somewhere. He thinks that's the best way to get it, but he's not wedded to that as the source of revenue. He just needs revenue for universal childcare, for example. Or he understands the role that the private sector plays in developing housing in New York. There's no way that the public sector could pay for all affordable housing development to fill this need that the city has. So he is changing somewhat, but he is still, wedded to his campaigan platform by and large.
And ultimately, like tax burdens, right? It's not something the mayor can determine, right? It goes back up to Albany. I mean, bottom line, like we say this every time we have you guys in, right? Yeah. Like ultimately, there is a limited power. As amazing this city is, right? And as amazing as it is to be mayor of New York City, there's limited power.
Yeah, New York City is funny that way. And so raising and lowering taxes is handled at the state level in Albany. And so that's in the hands of the state legislature and Governor Kathy Hochul. Now, that said, that's another group of folks in that Mamdani has been building bridges with, right? And so, he has the support of Hochul. He has the support of the state assembly leadership and the state senate leadership. And so you can see that he's making overtures in that direction as well. And for what it's worth, yesterday he had a huge rally in Queens, and Kathy Hochul there was, I guess she was heckled by the crowd. It was like a 10,000 person crowd, and they said, tax the rich, tax the rich. And so he's sort of leaning on those folks a bit as well.
Well, Laura, come back in here, because I do wonder with the conversations or what you guys found out in your reporting that as Zohran Mamdani has conversations with kind of the big titans or the financial titans of New York City, is he saying to some extent, listen, if you don't want me to keep talking about taxing the rich, so what can we do in terms of private-public partnerships to get some of these initiatives done? You guys get tax breaks, you get this, you get whatever, but help me here. Like, is some of that going to happen, or is that where it's going?
I don't know that the conversations have gotten to that level yet, but what people have said is that he has been receptive to what they have to say, to their experience, to their concerns, listening to their criticisms, listening to what their vast experience has been in working in and around New York City government, and that he's reached out to an extraordinary breadth of people seeking out their experiences and information, and how he uses that, it remains to be determined.
The president has called him little communist, as you two write in your piece. He's been called a lot by a lot of different people.
He has.
How does that happen, Fola? What does that relationship look like, Fola, if we play this out to him actually winning and becoming mayor of the city?
Well, I think anyone who becomes the mayor of New York City will have to grapple with a federal government that has taken funding or cut funding to programs that greatly impact the city and its operations. And so he has, I think, like he said about some of these other conversations, has said that he's willing to work with Trump on issues that are about affordability and are about making New York City work, and he's going to push back when Donald Trump is sending ICE agents or the National Guard or cutting funding. And I think, again, that's something probably anyone who becomes the mayor of New York City would have to grapple with.